The Empire's ultimatum. The grand warship Kareth, the flagship of the Galactic Empire's fleet, loomed in orbit over the neutral diplomatic station. It was a leviathan of war, its hull bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire continents to rubble. Within its command chambers, Supreme War Master Verek stood with his six-clawed hands clasped behind his back, his emerald-green eyes narrowed in disdain. Across from him, on a sleek metallic platform, stood Ambassador Elias Carter of the United Terran Federation. The human was calm, his face betraying no fear despite the overwhelming presence of the Empire's warlords. Around him, a collection of Terran diplomats and military officers observed silently. The chamber was tense, as if the very air itself held its breath. Verek finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "Humans, you stand before the might of the Galactic Empire. Your presence in the stars is an insult to the natural order. Your worlds, your fleets, your fragile grasp on the cosmos, all will fall under our dominion." Elias remained unshaken. He had expected nothing less from the Empire. Ever since first contact, the Imperials had viewed humanity as little more than an upstart species, an irritation in their grand design of conquest. The Empire was old, spanning thousands of years, ruling through fear and absolute control. "We acknowledge the Empire's strength," Elias said carefully. "However, humanity has no desire for war. We seek peaceful coexistence." Verek mandibles twitched in amusement. A weak species always begs for peace when confronted with power. He leaned forward, his towering form casting a shadow over the human delegation. "Your kind has no place among the stars. You will submit to our rule, or you will burn." Behind Elias, one of his aides stiffened, but the ambassador simply exhaled. He had spent years negotiating with hostile species, but none were as arrogant as the Empire. They had never faced true resistance. Every species they had encountered had either submitted or been eradicated. To them, war was a simple conquest, a matter of superiority and inevitability. "If you push for war," Elias said, his voice even, "then you must understand what you are asking for." Verek mandibles flared slightly. "We understand war better than you ever could, human." Elias met the alien's gaze with an intensity that made the warlord hesitate. "No," he said, "you don't." The War Master sneered. "You think your kind has the strength to resist us?" Elias tilted his head. "I think you don't truly understand what war means to humanity. To us, war isn't a conquest. It isn't a game of dominance. It is survival. And in survival, we do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not break." Verek let out a sharp, guttural laugh. "This is how you hope to deter us? Words? You think your kind has faced war as we have?" Elias slowly walked forward, standing directly beneath the towering alien. "Your kind fights wars for control. You conquer, you absorb, you move on. But have you ever fought a war where surrender meant extinction? Where your people would be wiped from history if you failed?" Verek amusement faded slightly, but he refused to show weakness. "You posture well, human, but your threats are meaningless. Your species has never faced an empire like ours." Elias held his gaze. "No," he admitted, "but you have never faced a species like us." There was a pause. The chamber remained still, the air charged with unspoken challenge. Then Elias continued, his voice unwavering. "You demand our submission. You believe we are weak. But before you commit to war, before you send your fleets to annihilate us, I offer you this, a glimpse into what you are truly facing." Verek clicked his mandibles. "More words." "No," Elias said. "A history lesson." At his signal, one of the Terran officers activated a small device, projecting a three-dimensional holographic interface into the air. "We call it the Compendium of Human Warfare," Elias said. "It is a record of our conflicts, our strategies, and our darkest moments. It is the truth of what war means to us. If you still wish for war after witnessing it, then we will accept your challenge." Verek studied the human carefully. His instinct told him that this was a trick, an act of desperation. And yet, There was something in the human's voice, something that gave him pause. A rare thing. A moment of hesitation. The War Master turned to his advisors, who exchanged uncertain glances. He growled low in his throat before facing Elias once more. "Very well," he said. "Show me this history of yours." Elias nodded, stepping back as the holographic archive began to load. The room dimmed as the first images appeared. The Battle of Cannae, the Mongol invasions, the trenches of the Great War. The history lesson had begun, and soon the Empire would understand what war truly meant to humanity. The archives of carnage. The chamber darkened as the first images flickered to life in the massive holographic display. A vast battlefield stretched across the projection, filled with armored soldiers clashing in brutal melee. The air was thick with smoke, blood, and the cacophony of dying men. Swords clashed, arrows rained down, and fire engulfed the wooden siege towers. Varric Thal's mandibles twitched slightly. This was not the sterile, calculated warfare of the Galactic Empire. This was something else, something far more savage. Ambassador Elias Carter folded his arms as he spoke. "This is Cannae, 216 BCE, the Roman Republic versus the Carthaginian general Hannibal. Here, 50,000 men were systematically slaughtered in a single day by a masterful encirclement strategy. This was over 2,000 years before we even left our planet." One of the Empire's warlords scoffed. "Primitive. The weapons are laughable." Elias glanced at him. "Weapons change, but strategy, ruthlessness, and the will to destroy an enemy utterly, that stays the same." The display shifted. A vast steppe, riders on horseback moving like a swarm of locusts. Mongol warriors, outnumbered, outmaneuvering their enemies with brutal efficiency. Entire cities razed to the ground, populations wiped out with cold precision. "The Mongol Empire," Elias continued, "a people who conquered nearly a quarter of our planet through nothing but superior tactics and sheer terror. They didn't just kill their enemies, they erased entire civilizations." The assembled imperial warlords shifted slightly. They had expected to see tales of simple conquests, not extermination on such a scale. The scene changed again. Trenches, mud, endless barbed wire, and corpses piled like refuse. Soldiers sat in filth, waiting for the next whistle that would send them over the top, into the maw of machine gun fire. Artillery roared like an angry god, pounding the earth into a desolate wasteland. "This is World War I, Elias said. "A war so horrific that soldiers lived in holes in the ground for years, dying by the millions for inches of land." He turned toward the Imperials. "Millions, in a single war." Varric Thal's expression remained unreadable, but one of his advisors let out a quiet hiss. "Madness. This is not war. This is slaughter." Elias nodded. "Yes, and it was only the beginning." The next scene made several Imperial officers instinctively step back. A massive mushroom cloud erupted from the ground, a towering inferno of fire and death. The blast wave rolled outward, flattening an entire city in seconds. "This is Hiroshima, 1945, Elias said. His voice remained steady, but there was something hard in his gaze. The first use of nuclear weapons in war. The death toll? Nearly 150,000 in an instant. A single bomb, and that was when we were still primitive. The silence in the chamber was profound. Even Varric Thal's claws tightened slightly. "Your people did this to their own kind?" one of the alien officers asked, voice laced with something that might have been disbelief. Elias didn't blink. "Yes." The projection moved forward through time. Firebombed cities. Jungle warfare. The Cold War brinkmanship, where humanity had stockpiled enough nuclear weapons to destroy itself 100 times over. Then, urban combat in sprawling megacities. Cyber warfare crippling entire nations. Drones and AI-controlled battlefields turning war into something unrecognizable. And finally, the screen showed something different. A barren world, a charred husk floating in space. The remains of an alien civilization, reduced to dust. "This," Elias said, "was the Zalzir War." The first and only time humanity fought a true existential battle against an alien threat. He turned to the Imperials. They were like you, powerful, confident. They believed we were weak. They attacked us first. The screen shifted, showing the Zalzir homeworld before the war, lush, thriving, teeming with alien life. Then, the afterimage, a dead planet. They're gone now, Elias said simply. Not because we wanted it, but because we had no choice. The chamber was silent. No Imperial spoke. No one scoffed now. Varric Thal's claws tapped against the arm of his chair, slow and measured. His gaze was unreadable, but the weight in the room had shifted. Finally, he exhaled. You claim your people do not desire war. Elias nodded. We don't. But if it comes, Elias met his gaze. If it comes, we do not fight for conquest. We do not fight for glory. We fight to win. Varric Thal stared at the ambassador for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and strode from the chamber. The Imperials followed, their silence speaking volumes. Elias remained, watching them leave, knowing that the true battle had just begun. The horror of modern war. The Imperial War Council had gathered in a private chamber aboard the Viekarith, the walls adorned with holographic banners displaying the Empire's countless conquests. Supreme War Master Varric Thal sat at the head of a long obsidian table, his expression unreadable as he studied the assembled warlords and strategists. The room was quieter than usual. The display of human warfare had shaken even the most hardened Imperial officers. None had expected such brutality, such relentless and total destruction. War, to the Empire, had always been a matter of honor, dominance, and strategic conquest. But humanity's wars were something else entirely. Varric Thal finally broke the silence. Thoughts? One of his generals, a broad-shouldered, scarred veteran named Exor Vaz, exhaled through his nostrils. They are efficient. Efficient, scoffed another warlord. They exterminate entire populations, even their own kind. This is not war. This is madness. And yet, Varric Thal mused, tapping his claws against the table, they are still here. The room fell silent again. That was the undeniable truth. Humanity had survived everything it had inflicted upon itself. It had endured wars that should have destroyed it, and it had come out stronger. One of the younger strategists, Calicra, leaned forward. The Zalzir were powerful. Their fleet rivaled ours. And yet the humans destroyed them completely. The planet we saw, it wasn't just conquered. It was erased. Varric Thal looked toward one of his intelligence officers. What do we know of this war? The officer hesitated before responding. Minimal records exist outside of human accounts. However, intercepted transmissions from other species suggest that the Zalzir attempted to conquer humanity much as we do with lesser species. They saw humans as weak, divided. The war lasted 7 years. 7. Another warlord frowned. The Zalzir should have crushed them in months. The intelligence officer nodded. They thought so as well. But the humans fought with tactics the Zalzir had never encountered. Psychological warfare, asymmetric strategies, scorched earth tactics. Entire colonies were sacrificed to bleed the enemy dry. And when humanity retaliated, they did so with total war. No treaties, no negotiation. When the Zalzir realized their mistake, it was too late. Their homeworld was glassed. The species was extinguished. Silence fell once more. The implications were clear. Finally, Varric Thal turned to the room. Would you fight them now? Knowing what we have seen, the warlords exchanged glances. Some still burned with arrogance, unwilling to admit fear. But others, the more experienced, the ones who had led countless campaigns, hesitated. Calicra cleared her throat. I do not doubt our might. But war with humanity will not be swift. It will not be clean. And if we miscalculate, it will not end with their surrender. Exor Vaz grunted. It will end with our extinction. The words hung heavy in the air. Varric Thal exhaled slowly. Our emperor expects victory. The war machine is already in motion. If we withdraw now, we appear weak. Exor Vaz bared his fangs. Better to appear weak than to be dead. A murmur of uneasy agreement rippled through the room. Varric Thal's mind raced. He had led countless campaigns, crushed dozens of civilizations. Never had he questioned a war. But this was different. The humans did not fight for conquest. They fought to win at any cost. They fought like cornered beasts, not like an empire seeking expansion. Finally, he leaned forward. If we withdraw, we must do so carefully. A direct retreat would be unacceptable to the emperor. A slow smile spread across Calicraw's face. Then we do not retreat. We reframe the conflict. The warlords turn to her. We present an alternative to war, an alliance of necessity, she continued. We tell the emperor that the humans are not just another species to be conquered, but a force that could be useful. That war is not worth the cost when diplomacy can serve our interests instead. Varric Thal considered this a strategic maneuver rather than outright surrender. He glanced at Exor Vaz, who nodded in approval. Send word to the emperor, Varric Thal commanded. The humans have earned our caution. We will negotiate. The decision was made. And for the first time in the Empire's history, war had been avoided not out of mercy, but out of fear. The Empire stands down. The Galactic Empire had never backed down from war. It had crushed civilizations, reduced planets to cinders, and ruled the stars with an iron grip. And yet, here they were, sending a formal communication to the United Terran Federation, not as conquerors, but as negotiators. Ambassador Elias Carter sat in the neutral diplomatic station, his expression impassive as the holographic transmission flickered to life. The towering form of Supreme War Master Varric Thal appeared before him, his emerald eyes lacking the arrogance they once held. The Galactic Empire has reconsidered its position, Varric Thal said, his voice carefully measured. We have determined that war with humanity does not serve our interests at this time. Elias allowed a small, knowing smile. The phrasing was intentional, an attempt to frame this as a strategic decision rather than a retreat. It didn't matter. The result was the same. What do you propose, then? Elias asked, his voice steady. A non-aggression pact, Varric Thal replied. We will recognize Terran sovereignty and agree to cease any hostile expansion toward your borders. In return, we expect the same from humanity. Elias nodded slowly. The deal was better than they had hoped for. The Empire had gone from demanding absolute submission to negotiating peace. But he wasn't naive. This was not goodwill. This was fear. The War Master studied him carefully. You're satisfied? Elias took a moment before responding. I am. However, I must ask, why this sudden change of heart? Varric Thal's mandibles twitched slightly. You showed us what your kind is capable of. Elias leaned forward. And yet, you still believe you are stronger. The War Master's claws flexed slightly, but he did not refute the statement. Strength is not always about who can destroy more. It is about knowing when destruction serves no purpose. Elias tilted his head. A wise sentiment. But tell me, War Master, if you had never seen our history, would we still be having this conversation? Varric Thal exhaled slowly. No, there it was. The truth laid bare. Elias nodded, standing up. Then let this be a lesson. Humanity does not seek war. But if it comes, we do not lose. Varric Thal regarded him for a long moment before speaking again. There are some within the Empire who still wish to test your kind, who believe that what we have seen is an exaggeration. Elias's expression darkened. Then remind them what happened to the last species that thought the same. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, passed through the War Master's eyes. I will. The transmission ended. The room fell silent. Behind Elias, one of his aides let out a quiet breath. So that's it? We avoided a war. Elias turned to her, his expression unreadable. For now, because he knew the truth. The Empire had not surrendered. It had simply delayed the inevitable. And when the time came, humanity would be ready.